After traveling from an area at sea level to an area at 18,000 feet above sea level, which of the following would occur? So what this is stating is that, let's say someone's on terrain, they're just living in an area where the grass would be here, this is the land, and that the nearest water would be at sea level. So it's at the same level, as opposed to in a different part of the same country maybe, or somewhere else, where it's higher above sea level. So they're higher up and the sea is there. So when you see sea level, not to get confused, it's not saying the person is underwater. It's just saying that land is not completely flat throughout the countries and the world, and that certain areas are going to be at a higher altitude or a higher level. You might not really notice the difference physically, but there are differences in the way that the air pressure works that could impact respiration. And for instance, if you're at this section over here, which is, we're going to say is the 18,000 feet above, so the higher altitude, versus here is the lower altitude, which one would have the effect on respiration? There actually would be less. This one would have less partial pressure of oxygen, or kind of like less oxygen in the air, in the environment. And as a result, your body would need to compensate if you were in this higher altitude section as opposed to this lower altitude section, because there's less oxygen in the environment. So to make up for having less oxygen available, your body would have to have a higher respiratory rate to take in more quickly, as opposed to in this lower area, if there was lots more oxygen in the air, we'll just say that this is oxygen, you wouldn't need to breathe in as many times because you would make more use of the quality of each breath, because you would be getting in more oxygen in each breath in this lower environment as opposed to this higher altitude environment. So, as a result, if you are taking in more respirations to get in more oxygen, that would be a hyperventilation, which is what would occur in this higher altitude environment as opposed to the lower. So hyperventilation would be correct. Hypoventilation would be incorrect, because that would be decreased amounts of ventilations or respirations in, which is not what we're looking for. We can eliminate that, because in this environment, as we were saying, that there's less oxygen available, so you would not have a hyperoxia or an increase in oxygen. This would lead to a decrease in oxygen available, so we could eliminate option C. And then option D says hypercapnia. This means that there are high levels of CO2 in the blood. In this example, if we're increasing respiratory rate and we're taking in more breaths, then you're also going to be taking out more, and as a result, the CO2 would be leaving, so you would lead to a more hypocapnic state versus hypercapnic, because you wouldn't have more CO2 lingering in the blood as a result of increased respiratory rate. So we can eliminate option D. So option B, hyperventilation, would be correct.